The sun blazed mercilessly over the dry plains of Arizona, its light bouncing off the bleached bones of forgotten battles. Dust curled like whispers around the boots of Captain Elijah Mercer, a Civil War veteran turned frontier scout, who sat silently on the porch of a weather-beaten cabin, fingers wrapped around a worn journal and eyes heavy with memories. Time had faded the gunpowder and the blood, but one story remained etched on his soul like a scar that refused to fade. He never told many people about it. Not because it was a tale of shame, nor pride, but because it was sacred. A story of humanity in a time when cruelty was currency and kindness was rare as rain in July. It was 1868 when it happened. The war was over, but the battles hadn't ended. Elijah had been recruited by the territorial government as a scout and negotiator, tasked with brokering peace, or war, between settlers and the remaining Apache tribes who still called these lands home. That year, he led a campaign against a notorious group of outlaws who had been masquerading as a rogue Apache band, killing settlers and framing the tribe. After weeks of tracking and confrontation, Elijah helped bring the truth to light, saving both settlers from fear and the Apache from unjust slaughter. The governor called him a hero. The settlers called him a peacemaker. But what they gave him as a reward turned his stomach. "They're yours," said Colonel Remy, a rigid man with white whiskers and an unbending spine, motioning to two frightened young girls being dragged forward by two cavalrymen. "Captured Apache. Twin sisters. We found them abandoned after the skirmish. No one's claimed them. Consider it a gift." Elijah looked at them, barefoot, silent, no older than 15, clinging to each other like broken-winged birds in a storm. Their names were Kaya and Naira, and their eyes were dark with grief and fear. They spoke little English, but their terror translated clearly. "They're not animals," Elijah growled. "They're not mine." Remy chuckled. "Don't be foolish, Captain. They'll be dead by week's end if left on their own. At least this way, they'll be taken care of." Taken care of. Elijah had heard that phrase used before, on southern plantations, in army barracks, in every place where a man justified ownership of another. He didn't answer then. He simply took the girls by the hand and led them to his horse, away from the camp, away from the stairs, and back to his remote cabin nestled near the Salt River. He didn't have a plan, only a conviction in his chest that screamed louder than the applause he'd received that morning. At first, the girls barely spoke. They flinched at sudden movements and refused to sleep unless pressed together on the cabin floor. Elijah gave them space. He left food and water, taught them where the well was, showed them how to tend the small garden. He never asked them to serve him. Never locked the door. Weeks passed. Kaya was the first to smile. It was faint, but real. Naira soon followed. They began to speak, broken English sprinkled with Apache words Elijah began learning. He told them stories, and eventually, they began telling him theirs. Their parents had been killed in a raid. They had hidden for days before being found and taken. One morning, Elijah walked outside to find the girls cleaning the porch, unasked. He stopped them gently. "You don't have to do that," he said. Kaya looked up at him, then at her sister. "We know," she replied softly. "But we want to." The months that followed transformed them all. Elijah taught them how to ride. How to trap rabbits, how to read, how to write their names. The land was quiet, a strange peace after so many years of war. Elijah, who had known only orders and commands, began to understand the healing that came from silence, from shared meals, from laughter. But the world didn't forget. One rainy evening, 3 men rode to Elijah's cabin. Settlers who had lost sons in Indian raids. When they saw the girls, their rage boiled. "You harboring savages now, Mercer," one spat. "They're not savages. They're children," Elijah replied, standing firm on the porch. "That's not what the law says. They're property. War spoils. They don't belong here." The girls had come outside, trembling, clinging once more to each other. Elijah saw the fear in their eyes, the memory of being dragged, handed over like tools. "You're not taking them," he said, voice like thunder. "They belong to no one." That night, Elijah packed the girls' things. He knew it was time. The town would never accept them. The world still bled hatred. He couldn't protect them forever, but maybe he could give them a chance. They rode north, through canyons and pine forests, across frozen rivers until they reached a small Apache community near the border. It took time to find someone who knew their language, someone who could explain what Elijah could not. That they were free. The goodbye was the hardest thing Elijah had ever done. Kaya cried openly. Naira hugged him so tightly it hurt. "You saved us," she whispered. "No," Elijah said, tears stinging his eyes. "You saved me." Years passed. The world moved on. Elijah never saw them again. He returned to his quiet cabin, planting corn and writing in his journal, trying to capture the story of the two girls who had reminded him what it meant to be human. It was nearly 15 years later when a knock came at his door. He opened it to find a woman dressed in beautiful traditional fabric, her long dark hair braided with care. Her smile was warm and familiar. "Kaya," he whispered, heart pounding. "And Naira," she said, stepping aside. Her twin stood beside her, holding the hand of a young boy who looked up at Elijah with curious eyes. They stayed for a week. They told him everything. How they had grown, married, started families. How they now taught at a school built on tribal land, teaching young girls their language, their stories, and their worth. "You never treated us like slaves," Kaya said one evening as they watched the sun dip below the horizon. "You treated us like daughters." "You were never mine to keep," Elijah said, voice thick. "Only to protect, until you could fly." The day they left again, Elijah stood watching their wagon disappear into the distance, feeling something inside him settle. He had no medals for that act. No parades, no headlines. But in that moment, he knew, he had done something right. Years later, after Elijah passed away, they found his journal. Inside, neatly written on a single page, were the words. "I was given slaves, but I saw souls. I was offered ownership, but I chose freedom. And in doing so, I found my own." And beneath it, a drawing of two girls, once broken, now whole, smiling beside a man who chose kindness in a world that had forgotten what it looked like. The lesson. Compassion is stronger than power. In a world where cruelty was normalized and others accepted slavery as reward, one man chose empathy over dominance. He saw not property, but souls, frightened, broken, and innocent. His choice to protect, respect, and love the girls rather than control them broke a chain of generational pain. Freedom is the most sacred gift we can offer another. Elijah's act of setting the twin sisters free gave them more than just safety, it gave them a future, dignity, and the ability to heal. In return, they gave him something priceless: love, connection, and legacy. True greatness lies not in what you take, but in what you give. He could have taken advantage of his reward, as others did. Instead, his legacy became one of silent heroism, transforming lives through kindness, patience, and sacrifice.